This video is sponsored by World of Warships. Corpse Bride is a stop-motion animated musical fantasy film released in 2005, directed by Mike Johnson and another director by, can you guess who? Yep, that's right, Tim Burton. I mean, yeah, his name is literally on the title, which is a bit of a giveaway, but also just by looking at the visuals going on, this is definitely a Tim Burton film. The plot is set in England during the Victorian times, as we follow our main character Victor, who is arranged to marry a young lady named Victoria as a mutual benefit for their parents. However, whilst practicing his vows, Victor accidentally marries a deceased woman named Emily and is brought down to the world of the dead, leading him to find a way to get back before Victoria is married off to another person. Corpse Bride is actually the third stop-motion film produced by Tim Burton, with his two previous being Nightmare Before Christmas, which I covered last year, and James and the Giant Peach, which, yeah, I still need to get around to. But Corpse Bride, despite being the third in line, is actually the first to be directed by Tim Burton himself, as the previous two were only produced by Burton, but directed by Henry Selick, the guy who would later go on to direct Coraline. Not only that, but the last stop motion that Burton produced was way back in 1993, so that's a lot of time which has passed, and considering Tim Burton was also producing this the same year.
The best kind of prize is a surprise.
Yeah, would Corpse Bride build upon the success and techniques used in his two previous stop motion features? Or will it be another questionable release from Burton that many would want to stay dead and buried? Let's dig it up and take a look. But first, a quick shout out from this video's sponsor, World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play game available to PC. The game is a team-based sea battle that requires different strategies and tactics to take out your opponents, with the option to team up with friends in a division. The game features over 400 historical ships, which are divided into destroyers, battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, and submarines. There are also new events and missions constantly being added to the game. One previous event even included being able to have Godzilla or Kong as a commander for your ship. You can join more than 44 million players online by clicking the link in the description below. And during registration, make sure to use the promo code BOOM to get 2.5 million credits, 7 days of premium account, 20 camouflages, 200 doubloons, and 2 ships, completely free. Thank you so much for listening guys, and thank you to Warships for sponsoring this video. Now back to the review. The film opens up with our main character Victor, with being a Tim Burton film, can you guess is voiced by? Yeah, Johnny Depp. As we traverse through this world in the opening credits, you immediately get that Tim Burton vibe that has given his film such an iconic look. Every person not only has a unique design, but also their own style of movement. I particularly love this little visual of the shopkeeper synchronizing his sweeps with the clock ticking. Victor is set to be married to a random woman he's never met before, named Victoria. Huh, Victor and Victoria, I see what you did there. And being a Tim Burton film, can you guess who would voice Victoria? That's right, Emma Watson. Both parents need the marriage to happen, and okay, no, before you type angrily in the comments or begin questioning reality, yeah, of course, it's Helena Bonham Carter voicing Victoria. Anyway, both parents need the marriage to happen as a mutual benefit, in order to raise the social class for Victor's parents and restore wealth for Victoria's. Honestly, I've seen worse reasons to get married. Oh, and by the way, this film is also a musical. The songs in this film are a bit hit and miss. Though this opening song isn't terrible, I don't think it gives off quite the same grand opening as the Nightmare Before Christmas song did. The two families meet for the first time to gather for the wedding rehearsal.
It's not as big as our place, dear. No, but bit shabby, really, isn't it?
Honestly, I never thought I'd hear the word chavvy in an American produced film, so yeah, fair play to that. As the parents leave, Victor sits down to play the piano, which captures Victoria's attention. Despite the nature of the arranged wedding, the two actually seem to be getting along pretty well. And I know I make fun of the typical Tim Burton castings, but credit to them, they both seem to do a good job in their respected roles. I especially like Johnny Depp's voicing for Victor.
If I may ask, Miss Everclot, where is your chaperone?
Later that day, the wedding rehearsal takes place, but due to nerves, Victor keeps fumbling his vows, and so he's told that until he learns them, the wedding will not go ahead. He decides to head off into the woods in order to practice.
With this hand, I will cut your... Oh, goodness, no.
Ha ha!
He eventually gets the hang of it, and all is going well until... So it turns out the branch that he put the ring onto was actually the skeleton hand of a deceased woman named Emily, who rises from the grave, claiming that she and Victor are now married. Okay, first up, what? Second up, ignoring the ludicrousness of what's happening here, what were the odds that some random guy would end up proposing to a random tree branch in the middle of the woods? Third up, he actually put the ring on her index finger rather than her wedding one. And fourth up, can we just appreciate how good of a horror sequence this moment actually is? Victor tries to escape, but fails and is brought down to the land of the dead, in what is arguably the coolest transition in the film. Victor is understandably a little freaked out about what's going on, so we get a musical number explaining the land of the dead, as well as Emily's backstory. Honestly, this is one of the strongest songs of the film. Not only for the song itself, but also the vibrant visuals and beautiful stop motion going on. Seriously, the stop motion animation in this segment is amazing, and really makes you respect the hard work that must have gone on behind the scenes. Also, this song gives me strong vibes from the 1929 Silly Symphony short, The Skeleton Dance. During the song, we're told of how Emily was previously married to a fella who immediately murdered her after the wedding, stealing her jewels and riches, and so she vowed to wait under the tree in the graveyard until her real true love turned up to marry her. Again, do you not realise how insanely low the odds were of that happening? And even if you did happen to get a living guy proposing to your dead corpse, it's probably not the kind of guy you want to be married to.
Not a great plan.
I suppose it's also lucky for Emily that despite her entire arm and leg decomposing, much of the rest of her body, including the face and eyes, have stayed fully intact. Otherwise, this could have been a much darker looking film. Victor is understandably freaked out by all this and makes a run for it. I do quite like how ironically the land of the dead is given these brighter and more vibrant colours, whereas the land of living is prominently dark, grey, and well, lifeless.
Married, huh? I'm a widow.
Ha ha!
Emily eventually catches up to Victor and presents him a gift that she got in celebration of their marriage. Turns out to be his childhood dog named Scraps, which reminded me a lot of the little dog from Nightmare Before Christmas. Apparently Burton was really close to his childhood dog, so he liked to put this trait onto his characters in his films. Emily and Victor seem to be forming a bond, but then Victor comes up with an idea to trick Emily to take him back to the land of the living, by telling her that she needs to meet his parents. They go to see a skeleton named Elder Gootnecht, who grants them a temporary passage to the world of the living.
Why go up there when people are dying to get down here?
Ha ha!
Now then.
Okay, I'll admit, I do love that little moment. Victor and Emily get transported back, where Victor tells Emily to wait in the woods, whilst he goes to fetch his parents. To which she... does? Would say that she's a bit brain dead, but yeah. What Victor actually plans to do is run off to find Victoria. I must admit, after the bond Emily and Victor began to form earlier, it does seem a little dick of him to pull a scheme like this. I like to think at this moment he's having doubts about whether this is the right thing to do, but I think in reality, he's more thinking about how he's going to pull the plan off. The maggot inside Emily's head expresses doubt, and so Emily heads on after him.
He couldn't get far with those cold feet.
Ha
I suppose this is a good time to point out that the maggot is actually based off an old-time American actor, Peter Lorre, who you've probably seen parodied in many other animations too.
They make me laugh.
Victor manages to find Victoria and confesses his love for her, and all appears to be going well until Emily shows up.
Darling, who's this?
Who is she?
I'm necrophiliac. Angered by what she's seen, Emily grabs Victor and takes him back to the land of the dead. Victor tries to explain the situation, but in typical movie fashion, ends up wording it wrong, making the situation a whole lot worse.
Why can't you understand? It was a mistake. I would never marry you.
I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that.
Meanwhile, Emily tries to tell her parents and the pastor about what has just happened, but they don't believe her and assume Victor has just left her for another woman. Hearing the commotion, a gentleman named Lord Barkis, who definitely isn't evil, steps in and offers to take the place of Victor to marry Victoria instead, with some subtle persuasion.
If I had a woman like your daughter on my arm, I would lavish her with riches befitting royalty.
Subtle as a brick. Meanwhile, back in the land of the dead, Victor is feeling guilty about what happened, for real this time, and finds Emily in order to make amends. I actually really like this scene with the piano. It's one of those moments where no dialogue is spoken and their emotion is conveyed through the music that they play together. It's just a much more creative take on a generic situation, and I really appreciate that. It kind of reminds me of that non-dialogue biscuit scene from The Boat That Rocked. And of course the stop motion is once again on form here. Their moment is interrupted with a new arrival to the land of the dead, which happens to be the coachman for Victor's family who recently died, in which he informs Victor of Victoria's wedding to Lord Barkis. Devastated by the news, Victor then overhears a conversation with Emily where she's told that due to her already being dead, the "till death do we part" of their vows has already come into effect, thus meaning that they're not actually married. And for them to be truly married, they need to marry up on the land of the living, where Victor will have to then drink a poison potion which will kill him instantly. In which, surprisingly, Victor actually agrees to go along with. We then get a Disney princess type of scene as Victor gets ready for his wedding, along with a pretty grand song. And again, I love the immediate contrast we get from the wedding in the land of the dead to the wedding in the land of the living. Victoria's and Lord Barkis' wedding is interrupted as the dead suddenly appear around them.
There's an eye in me soup.
ha!
Initially, people are freaked out by this sight, but after recognising it's actually their deceased family, everyone reunites and gathers in the church for Victor's and Emily's wedding.
You shall not enter here! Back!
Keep it down, we're in a church.
Just as Victor's about to drink the potion, Emily notices Victoria lurking in the back, and decides that the wedding isn't right, and tells Victor that he should be marrying Victoria instead. All appears to be going well, until surprise villain Lord Barkis turns up to steal Victoria away. And not only that, but it turns out that Lord Barkis was also Emily's original husband that ended up murdering her and taking her jewellery.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
A fight breaks out between Victor and Barkis, with Emily intervening to save Victor's life. Barkis is about to leave with Victoria, but not before giving a patronising toast to Emily, where he unknowingly drinks the poison and ends up dying. Yeah, not gonna lie, as much as I do like this end scene, you can't help but feel that Barkis suddenly deciding to drink that wine felt a little forced. Now dead, the rest of the dead folks seize Barkis and drag him back down to the land of the dead, where he will serve out his punishment. Victor and Victoria end up getting married, and Emily walks off into the night alone, where she fades into butterflies, symbolizing her newfound freedom, I guess.
Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
It's an ending, that's enough.
I must admit, I'm a little bit conflicted with this choice of ending. On one hand, I do praise the film for not taking the easy route, as it makes both Emily and Victoria likeable characters, so the choice of whom Victor should marry isn't quite so clear cut. An easier plot would have been that Victoria is a complete bitch, whereby Victor gradually falls in love with the corpse bride and decides to drink the potion to be with her, and I'm sure the dialogue would have gone something like this. "Victor, no! How could you choose her over Victoria? You're now dead!"
Well, quite frankly, Mother, I can honestly say at this moment that I've never felt more alive.
So yeah, I do have to give the film credit for that, but honestly, I kind of felt like Emily was the better choice. Don't get me wrong, Victoria is not a bad character by any means, but we've just had so much more screen time to get to know Emily's backstory, and see the development her and Victor have had throughout the film. I genuinely thought that piano scene was a great visual to show how their characters were so much alike. And let's remind ourselves that Victor did look like he was genuinely happy to be marrying Emily, and it was her that stopped the wedding. Now, I do get why the filmmakers chose this ending, as it does show that Emily is now a free person rather than just immediately falling in love with whoever puts a ring on her finger, giving her a nice character arc, and it would have been unfair just to leave poor Victoria high and dry. But I don't know, I still think Emily would have been the better choice, as that's what we've seen better developed throughout this film. I mean, do let me know in the comment section below of who you think Victor should have chosen and why. So yeah, everything's all good and happy, Victor has married Victoria, Emily is now a bunch of butterflies, where the film ends and the credits roll. And that's Corpse Bride. My overall thoughts for the film? I really liked it. The film is just over an hour long, and for the most part it does pretty well with the pacing. Despite the film coming out 12 years after Burton's last stop motion project, this one still manages to capture the magic that Nightmare Before Christmas did, especially when you consider Burton was producing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory alongside this film. And you can see how much more refined the stop motion animation has come along since Nightmare Before Christmas. The character movements are so energetic and smooth, with great visuals throughout, and fantastic facial expressions that almost make you think that this is CGI. Sure, there are some CGI elements thrown in, but for most of the stop motion, it's actually legit, and was done using a new technique of gears and larger scale models to better animate the characters, which though looking great on screen, was apparently an absolute nightmare to animate with. The musical score is also fantastic in this film, truly complementing the immersive visuals and really being able to give this film so much more energy and life. No pun intended. As for the musical songs themselves, for the most part, they're fine. Not quite as up there as Nightmare Before Christmas, but still good. My favourite definitely being the Remains of the Day song, and my least favourite being Tears to Shed, which honestly was not only the most underwhelming, but also felt kind of pointless. If I were to have a couple of other negatives with the film, it would be that the land of the living is a bit too dimly lit and monotone. And yeah, I know that's meant to help it contrast with the more vibrant Land of the Dead setting, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still very boring to look at, especially when much of the story takes place here. I feel Coraline handled this much better by still having the real world better lighted, and had Coraline dressed in bright colours so that she contrasted with the grim background. Also, I don't think the characters of Victor and Victoria were all that well developed. Victor, for the most part of the film, behaves like a bit of an arsehole towards Emily, and when he does start liking her, he's told that he's not allowed to like her, and so ends up getting married to Victoria, not really making the decision himself. And Victoria, like I said, isn't a bad character, but she is just kind of there, and falls second fiddle to Emily. But those are only minor negatives. and the film was an overwhelming success at the box office, grossing a total of $118 million worldwide from its initial $40 million budget, and was nominated for Best Animated Feature, but losing to Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. If you haven't seen this film yet, I highly recommend checking it out, and if you have seen it, then I'd recommend digging it back up and taking it for another spin.
To be by our side, and that's the story of our dog.